My grandfather, Steve Napleton, was really kind of the one who took us into that next level of new car dealer. He was an extremely hardworking person. I mean, 6 days a week, 10, 12-hour days was just the expectation. Probably 7 days a week until Illinois, by law, closed dealerships on Sundays. He instilled that work ethic in every one of his sons. When you see the hard work happening, you can't help but try to follow that path. Whatever job that you want in the future, emulate that behavior now. Act like you've already got the job.
Welcome to The Fuel Line, where we explore all things automotive with a focus on mergers and acquisitions. Hi, my name's Fareed Ahmed. I'm the founder and the CEO of DSMA and your favorite podcast host. Each episode, we connect with influential figures that drive the automotive landscape. Let's shift into gear and get started.
Hi, welcome to The Fuel Line. My name's Fareed Ahmed, and I'm your favorite podcast host, where we drive conversation with people in the industry that have got their finger on the trigger and know what's going on in the automotive retail business. Today, I'm joined by Steve Napleton, a partner at the Steve Napleton Auto Group, a multi-brand dealership group serving the Chicagoland area and beyond. With deep family roots in the automotive industry since 1931, Steve continues a proud legacy built on integrity, innovation, community, and trust. We'll talk about his journey in the retail automotive industry, how he's led growth in a rapidly changing market, and the role of philanthropy, including the Barlick Foundation, in shaping his approach to leadership and impact. Hi, Steve. Thanks again for joining us today on The Fuel Line. Steve, your family's legacy is well known. I know that there's three concentrated Napleton organizations, but what does that legacy mean to you personally, Steve?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for inviting me onto this. I'm really, really happy to talk. So our group all traces back to my great-grandfather who started a dealership on the south side of Chicago. Actually, originally it was a mechanic's shop. He fixed motorcycles.
Wow.
Yeah, so fixed motorcycles, fixed cars, and then he was a sub dealer at the time for a big dealer down the street. So every so often, you need $400 of work done on your car, you might as well buy a new one for $800, right? And so he would sell a few on the side, and that was it for 20 odd years. That was the business, and he worked with my grandfather, with his nephew. Was kind of like, when talk about family business, family was 80% of the employees at the time.
My God.
And they got their break with a DeSoto dealership in the 50s, and then had to scramble because the DeSoto basically ceased operations and they lost their new car flag.
Wow.
So it was kind of a moment that could have gone a lot of different ways. And they were fortunate enough to get a Plymouth franchise and then, kind of build from there. So my grandfather, Steve Napleton, was really kind of the one who, really took us into that next level of new car dealer. And then got his 5 of his 6 sons, were brought into the business. Probably, they first started working in shop and they were maybe 11, 12 years old, sweeping floors and, helping to change oil and move cars around. And, slowly but surely they all got hooked and got into the business. And so all 5 of the 6 went on to be car dealers and,
Wow.
And then kind of eventually established their own businesses as I progressed.
Wow. So your leadership in the Illinois market is legendary again, Steve. Maybe you could share with the audience who had the major impact. Who was your mentor? Who helped you create the leadership style that you have today that's so well known?
Well, I think a lot of it does really trace back to my grandfather. He was an extremely hardworking person. I mean, 6 days a week, 10, 12-hour days was just the expectation. Probably 7 days a week until Illinois, by law, closed dealerships on Sundays. he instilled that work ethic in every one of his sons. And, you know, they're, my father and a couple of my uncles are in their 70s, and, there's not a retirement off ramp that they're looking at, right? They enjoy work, they enjoy what they do and staying involved in the business. And I think that kind of just trickles down to, right now I'm partners with my three brothers and my brother-in-law in our business, which is kind of 11 stores in Chicagoland. But I've got cousins who are involved in my uncle's organizations as well, right? Who are kind of taking on that next generation. So, when you see the hard work happening, you can't help but try to follow that path, right? The expectation is there. And ultimately, it's really rewarding when you see that hard work pay off. And that's every time we acquire a new store, the hard work starts over again. Winning over the people, changing the process. That doesn't just automatically happen, as anybody who's in the car business knows.
Steve, there's a number of organizations that have the ambition to grow to the size that you have. You have 11 stores now, and your organization's renowned for its culture. But how do you maintain that consistency of a culture? 11 rooftops. I know geographically you may have some advantages because you're maybe closer than some other groups are. But how do you maintain that consistency in culture? And do you see any challenges in the future as you expand further and further into the marketplace?
I think that from a consistency standpoint, there are some things that we do try to, maintain consistency across organizations. So, our road to the sale that we train every salesperson on, every sales manager on, is the same across those stores. And the way that we train on that, we try to be consistent with. My father and his a longtime business partner, Chuck Weck, hammered that home on my brothers and I.
Really?
There was times when we had salespeople who really just couldn't get it. And so we just laminated note cards, and we had it so they could hang them off their neck and pull it out in case they needed it when they're in training. Because, at the end of the day, you don't want to, everybody knows when maybe your close rate's going down, when things are going a little sideways, it's the fundamentals that are dropping off. It's corners that are being cut. So, we're very consistent about that, I think. And then also, as we've grown, we have, kind of found, we have people kind of at the corporate area that really help us to maybe lead specific silos and ensure that consistency. So we have the service and parts kind of directorship that's not store specific. We have a BDC, focus a person who's helping to train and consistency. And it's a constant, it's constant work.
Yeah.
It's never done.
No.
We're for our side of things, I think we're about 520 employees now. And, you wish it was on the same 520 from year to year. And I think that we have been fortunate that we've had probably much more luck in terms of turnover than you might hear in the industry. But, there's still new people. There's people who you want to improve and get to that next level. And I think that, we have some great people that are helping us to do that.
A lot of people concentrate on all the successes, or they even believe that Steve Napleton, he just one success after another. But we all know that this business is very volatile. It throws challenges out of left field. COVID was such an amazing surprise for most dealers. What has been the toughest moment in your career? And how did you get through that tough? And I'm really asking this because there's younger people that watch this show that have ambitions to grow, and they need to understand that not everything's rosy. Things are not always going to go well. Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about that and a bit about the toughest times that you've had.
Well, honestly, even young people who have been in the business for 5 years have been through quite a bit, right? You start with COVID. A lot of the knee-jerk reaction was to kind of furlough people while there was the good benefits. And,
right.
What happened? Well, very quickly, the market came roaring back. And then we went headlong into the chip crisis where, you're used to having a 2 or 3 month supply of new vehicles in the back. Sometimes we couldn't fill our showrooms because we had so few in stock.
Crazy.
Right? So, it was just adapting to that. Obviously there was some very good years in that. So, we were able to make some lemonade out of it. But, those challenges are, you don't know that they're going to turn out that well at the moment. Um, I think from my perspective, I've been parts of two, directly overseeing two acquisitions where I've, overseen that store and, have to go into that, meet the employees from the previous dealer and, slowly kind of win them over, right? I mean, I always try to keep in mind on an acquisition, these employees didn't choose to have the dealership sold. You hope that what we're doing is coming and injecting energy, injecting new opportunity, giving them, I think what we have some really fantastic, pay plans that, have consistently kind of given people more opportunity. But day 1, day 4, day 10, they don't quite know that yet. You have to prove it to them. So I think that that's always a challenge. And, not to mention that those first days you haven't switched over the internet provider, properly, or all of a sudden, your website isn't up and you feel like you don't exist if your website isn't up. So there's these things that are those challenges that in retrospect, it's like having young kids. You don't remember all the 2 a.m. wake ups down the road. Trying to get through it. And then now here you are, in a much better spot. So, those have been challenging, but also exciting, right?
Yeah, got it.
If we're growing. There's not many stores we come in and they just have a little welcome parade for us and say, let's keep it rocking. A lot of times there's that shake up here.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about what's on everybody's minds. What's going to happen to the EV world and how is it going to impact the retail landscape? There's OEMs in the United States, in Canada. We're very worried about the explosion of the Chinese brand coming in and what have you. Can you talk a little bit about how you guys have adapted to what is inevitably going to be a factor that we are dealing with today, we're going to have to deal with in the future? But talk to me a little about your philosophy on what's happening with the EVs and what do you see the short to medium term future be like?
I wish I had more certainty on that. I think, everything that we do at the dealership level is driven by the customer, right? And I think that what is really going to be interesting in these next, few months is, well, what is the customer's true appetite for EVs?
Right.
Because the subsidies expiring, you can make an argument that eventually, like some of the tariff price increases, we think will, eventually make their way through a little more prominently. That price reset might just be a temporary speed bump, and the people who ultimately believe in adopting, the EVs for their own personal lifestyle will continue on that road. And I think it'd also be telling too to see what the automakers do if they're continuing to try to kind of bring out more volume related EV product, rather than maybe like the premium related product. So I think, for our brands, we've always, we're good partners, when there's needs for dealership renovation and for increased charging capacity and everything. I think that we've always, been realistic about the brands going that way. We want to be able to support that. But, I think that, there's some great EVs out there. I think that some people drive them and they're lifelong converts. Others can't get over the range anxiety, and
I'm one of them. I'm one of them, Steve.
Right? Yeah, what we found is, well, those people might throttle back into a hybrid, right? So they like the idea of not going to the gas station as much, but they want that flexibility. And obviously, we've seen tremendous growth in hybrids, in the last couple of years. So, I'm thinking that it's like the only constant has changed in our business. I'm thinking we'll continue to see that. But the real question is, well, what's going to happen? Some of these products that have been announced for 2 or 3 years from now, we're starting to see some manufacturers drop those products. If that trend continues, well, the product pipeline is our long-term future, right? So that's going to drive it, I think.
So let's switch gears a little bit and let's focus on your acquisition plans for 2026 and beyond. How do you balance acquisitions with organic expansions? And what key factors guide you through those decisions when you're evaluating critical decisions like that?
I think that so our group has kind of been on this pace of buying a store or two per year, for recent history. And I think, we're mindful that we want to make sure that we have quality transitions, that we can keep our other stores, going profitably, and then, have the, not just the share of mind for my partners and I, but also for, key employees that we might need to bring into that new acquisition. So that kind of has worked for us. I think that it's been something that we're focused on. Hey, we want to have a lineup of winners. We don't need to add losers to the mix, right? So we want to keep that going, and I think be mindful on that is key. But look, we're focused mostly on Chicagoland, or perhaps we'll expand into nearby states one day. But we have my brothers and I have presence in the stores every day. So we believe in that kind of personal touch. What we're looking for here in Chicago is a kind of the mix of strong brands, and also typically an opportunity to improve operations. We look at it that the best return on investment that we can find is finding a store that we can improve in a market that lends itself to expansion, and doing the hard work to bring it to that next level, right? And the reality is, most of the time those are your opportunities anyway.
Right.
The current work light admit, hey, I'm retirement age. I don't really have the energy for it at this moment, but yes, there's more meat on the bone. And the ones who are doing really, really well, they're having a pretty good time. They're kind of looking to move it too far.
Right. I want to move on to another subject. I don't see a lot of organizations committing to charity work as much as your organization does. And I know that, and we're very proud sponsors of your Violet Foundation. Can you maybe share with me a little bit about what your inspiration was behind that, and what impact is it having on your business today?
Well, thank you for asking. I think, our commitment to the Violet Foundation of Pediatric Brain Cancer is very personal. November of 2021, my 3-year-old daughter, Violet, was diagnosed with a very aggressive brain tumor.
Sorry to hear that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's called DIPG, or diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma. And, when she was diagnosed, it was explained to us that it basically was 99% fatal, and that the treatment protocol was the same that it was for Neil Armstrong's daughter in 1962.
Wow.
And, I think that, it was obviously, completely life-changing for my wife and I, for really everybody around us, because you never in a million years would imagine that you need to think about potentially losing a young son or daughter.
Can't imagine.
And I'm fortunate that when Violet was in her fight, that my brothers, my brother-in-law, my father, all the people I work with, understood that I immediately needed to attend to my family. I needed to be there with her, and for my wife, and that work had to wait.
Right.
But I think throughout that battle, we did start thinking of, well, there's lots of people in situations where maybe they probably, and what I found is they do the same thing, no matter what their situation is. But just the financial burden that comes because of that is overwhelming at a time when they're literally in the worst time of their life. So Violet passed in February of 2022. Later that year, my wife and I started the Violet Foundation for Pediatric Brain Cancer. And we raise money for two things. We principally give money to research to hopefully find better treatments for these kids. Brain cancer is actually the number one killer of children in the United States.
I did not know that.
More so than leukemia, more so than any other disease. It's brain cancer. There are some treatments that are slightly better than others, some prognoses that are better than others, but all of them come with serious side effects and long-term consequences. So we invest primarily in research, but we also support families who are going through it. And just honestly, they just need a little help. So we've been fortunate in the 3 years. Yeah, but we've been fortunate in the 3 years that we've been in operation. We've helped over 200 families.
Have you really? That is
fantastic. And these are just people who, are just trying to get by, trying to pay their mortgage. I mean, the one recent example that we've had is that there was we heard about a family who the father owned a independent repair shop and owner operator, right? Well, his daughter got the fake prognosis that Violet did, and as they saw treatment for her, every hour that he wasn't at work was less revenue, right? He had to keep his insurance active, so he's trying to balance both worlds, and it's just simply impossible because he's trying to help his daughter fight through it, and he obviously is completely torn. And so the kind of help that we provide and other foundations like ours helps. It's not everything. It's not taking away all the problems.
Though. It's
something, right? Yeah, and it's something quick, right? So we can get checked within the week. So that's kind of where I personally now spend a lot of my time, and I'm really fortunate that my not just my extended family, my uncles Ed, Paul, Bill, in the business have adopted this fundraising as part of what they do.
Oh, that's fantastic.
But even other car dealers that we know, we've met through the OEM meetings through local Chicago. They joined on. So actually, this month in October is a campaign we run called Driven for Kids, which basically participating dealerships kind of contribute to Violet Foundation, and that their customers and employees know that what they're doing this month is helping to support that.
Oh, wonderful.
And it's been, I think, in a business perspective, we go into it, and anybody running a business is, you want that business to reflect your values and your priorities. And when we do this, I think that customers, they see it. They see our license plate frames that might match it, or we've got some stuff in the showroom. Ultimately, I'm not sure that really swings a buying decision dramatically, right?
I understand.
If there's no harm in telling people, hey, we care about this issue. We're putting real money behind it. And I think our employees, we have people who've been in this business 34 years. Something about taking certain times of year and devoting it to this, I think, really is meaningful to many of our employees.
Now, Steve, first off, from us, and I'm sure everybody watching, our condolences in you losing Violet. That must have been a horrific time for you and your wife. And for you guys, it's so admirable to convert pain into action and do something about it. Most people, most probably would not have, I think, the courage or the strength to do something. So hat off to you, man, for that. Fantastic. But for the people watching, if anybody wanted to donate, participate in any way they could, how do they do that, Steve?
It takes, they could go to our website is violet-foundation.org.
Okay.
And it's, they can read a little more about Violet, about some of the families we've helped. We've got some examples of, kids we've been able to help, and also the research projects we support. And there's a way to help out there as well. That, in the car business, look, with this Driven for Kids campaign is one that we hope that resonates with some people. I mean, some of the car dealers that I know and I'll say outside my family, because of course I'm going to, I'm going to be proud of my family. They've always been involved in the community. They've always been generous. They've always been people who understand that, that what we do is kind of ingrained with the overall world. And pediatric brain cancer is not something that's specific to any one community. It's really, it's national. In fact, our grants, one of the organizations that refers families to us is national. So we've supported families in 30 states.
That is amazing.
It really be cross-cutting. So I'd say, if anybody who works in a dealership, certainly we would welcome any kind of, their involvement if they were so moved.
Great. When we post this, we'll mention that website again.
Thank you.
Last question. Actually, I've got so many questions for you, Steve. You're so interesting. But one of the last questions is, you're a very young person, and you've come through the school of working with family, the hard knocks. What advice would you give to the next generation who want to lead with integrity, resilience like yourself, And how do they create that long-term vision for themselves? If you could talk to me, and let's say I'm a very old guy, by the way, Steve, but let's say I was in my early 20s and I was looking to make this a future for myself, what advice would you give me?
So I've always, I didn't immediately go into the car business. I worked in the,
Okay.
I worked in for a couple of investment banks. I worked for the State Department. I've kind of done different things outside the business, and then joined when I was in my 30s, right? So, I like to think I've got a little, kind of cross-cutting experience. And the one thing I've always shared with young people is whatever job that you want in the future, emulate that behavior now. Act like you've already got the job and try to do that. So if you're a salesperson, right, see what the sales manager is doing. Ask if you can help. First of all, I guarantee they say, I'd be happy to have your help. And you don't necessarily ask for anything in return, but I think what I was seeing happen time and time again is, you start helping, you start doing those things, and that kind of like the team player that you embody,
right?
All of a sudden you find yourself in that management position because people see that you truly want to help the team, and by the way, you've learned things above and beyond your peers, right? So I think that'd be from a young age. That's something that I would say for sure. And then
fantastic.
I think, it more of a leadership position. So I got into business, and we had taken over a Kia store. And, when we got there, really, there wasn't many people left on the showroom floor. And I was a few months in the business. I had done it in high school and college, but it had been a minute. So we're just trying to staff, right? And we're hiring, people with, a bunch of stops along the way. I call them retreads, the ones who are looking for the perfect job, and it's been 20 or so to get there. And I just saw, there are some things that I saw that I just did not like, right? The way they were, dealing with the customer, the way that when they didn't know something, they maybe, tried to lie to cover it up. These little things. And, had a realization a few months in that, what, yes, we need coverage. Yes, we need to, be able to sell cars, but there's just certain things that I'm not going to tolerate, right? It's my last name on the building in the front. Beyond that, it's just not the kind of environment I want to be in, is where people are doing these things. So I think that culture is such a hard thing to establish. And, I think that when people are taking in the opposite direction, even if they're a top performer, even if they've got other things that kind of give you pause, you need to take that step to either, address it and fix it, or remove them from that culture and build with people who really embody how you want your customers to be treated. And, I kind of had a little bit a big turnover at that moment of several people. I was like, all right, we can't deal with this. I've got to turn over a leaf. But ultimately, it led to better results, a much more positive atmosphere. And I believe that customers, they feed off the atmosphere that they feel inside a dealership. If they walk in a showroom and it's positive and it's good, customers feel that, and they're more likely to want to do business with you. And so, I've been really well served by it. And also, I come here every day, so I want to feel proud and good about everybody around me, and know that if my neighbor came into the store a day unannounced when I wasn't there, that they'd walk away saying I had a great experience. So that's what we shoot for. And I think that would be my advice to people in leadership.
Last fun question. What's your favorite car, Steve? Bit awkward with multiple franchises, I know.
I'll say this because this is a bit neutral, but so we're not a Jeep dealer. We were a Jeep dealer for a long time, and we sold our store in the city a few years back. So I can say this because we don't currently represent Jeep, but when I was in my 20s, I got a Jeep Wrangler, and I mean, it was just it's hard to have more fun, than driving a Wrangler with the top down.
I mean,
right. Right now I drive cars that we sell, Mazdas and Subaru, Kias back when we were at Q. But you think back, if you ask your favorite car, people inevitably go back to themselves at a young age. And driving around a little more carefree. And that was a blast.
Steve, listen, man, thank you for taking the time. I know you're a busy guy, 11 stores plus your family, but it's people like you that add some value to our audience. And quite honestly, you're quite an inspiration. So really, really, thank you so much for everything you do, and good selling. And I hope that your destiny is where you want it to take you. So all the very best, my friend. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Fareed. We appreciate it.